I'm Dr. Randy Bach. I'm honored today to be with you and to be here in the studios of Newton TV and discuss the mayoral election of Newton coming up. Let me check my watch, it's October, November's around the corner. Halloween comes first, and in line with that, we have somebody in costume here today with us, Al Cecchinelli, who is running for mayor. And he is, what does his costume have? His costume has an Al Cecchinelli for mayor button, and he's in a suit. And ordinarily, he may not be, but he's pursuing the mayoralty? Yeah, that's a tough word. Yeah. Being mayor of Newton. And we want to talk about his ideas. We had Mark Laredo, Councilor Mark Laredo, on last time, so you can go check that out for comparison. And I wanted to have them on together for the debate, but we're not going to do that. We're going to have Al with us today. And Mr. Cecchinelli, tell us what differentiates you from the other candidate or candidates. How many are there running? I think there's only two, right?
There's only two, yeah.
In the general. I mean, you can talk about what are your chances. There seem to be a lot of Laredo signs. What's your play? What's been going on with you campaigning and all that kind of stuff? And how do you position yourself for the mayoralty? I got that right that time. And how would things be different under Mayor Al Cecchinelli?
Well, first off, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to get out and get my message out to the people in Newton. I'm a little behind. I had some health issues which I'm recovered from now, and we're out there campaigning. We're out there knocking doors. We're out there doing standouts. I've got some text messaging that I'm doing, and the biggest differential between myself and my opponent is that I want to work for you, the citizens of Newton, not the developers, not the unions. I want to work for you. I feel that the job of mayor is to make Newton the best for its citizens. I think that it's important that you know that I want to be your mayor, not anybody else's. No private interests, nothing. I haven't pursued any endorsements because I don't feel that I don't want to owe anybody. I don't want it to have the impression that I owe anybody. I want you to know that I will be doing the best for you, the citizens. The only endorsement I'm looking for is your vote on November 4th. I would not be in favor of keeping us a sanctuary city. That's a big difference between me and my opponent. I would want to work with the federal government to enforce the laws of this country. The federal laws supersede any laws of the state or local laws, and I think it's important that we work together for a strong United States. My opponent has voted for every high-density development that's come before the City Council. I have fought almost every high-density development that's come before the Council. I'm not against development. I am against overdevelopment. We need to make special permits special again. If you, a citizen, are looking to add an ancillary apartment or a ramp for a handicap ramp onto your property, if you need a parking space on your property, these are the reasons we need special permits, not so that a developer can make an extra $200,000 on his overdevelopment of the city. We need to stop the strip mining of the city by the developers. We've reached the 40B limit, so we don't have to give those permits out anymore. We need to look at what our housing is, because we don't have a housing shortage in Newton. We have a low-income housing shortage. We have about 75 low-income housing units right now in the queue of the 2,300 units that we have that are being built right now in the city. We need to change our inclusionary zone as opposed to 90% of median income in the community. We need to drop it to 30% of the median income. 90% of the median income is about $100,000 a year. I don't consider that low-income housing, and I don't know anybody that does. We need to make housing available for people that are making $40,000 a year. You know, people talk about having a diverse, city. Well, diversity of income is also important, and diversity of ideas are important. And those are the two things that it doesn't seem like anybody's fighting for.
Well, those are interesting concepts there. We could handle them chronologically or backwards. I'm going to do backwards because the one I heard last. So I don't know who would be doing this thing of creating low-income housing. I mean, I'm a market guy. The markets speak. It's not necessarily the case that everybody who works in Weston is going to live in Weston or Dover or something like that. If they need their lawns manicured, landscaped, they need firewood pumped in, it could be some guy from Marlborough or Westboro or some other place is doing it. Here, it could be very well, some piece of Waltham or Brighton or whatever. People come in, their cars, we have roads. I don't think it's essential that everybody live in their place. For decades, whatever, I never worked in the city I lived in. I had an office on the other side of the river and north of Chelsea and East Boston in Revere, and I drove there. Whatever. Yeah. It's like I think people are very habitable and commutable and so forth. And so I don't see why it's a city's onus to manufacture places artificially. And I'm just curious. I'm okay with if people want to make other arrangements. I think that we've kind of had this idea that everybody needs to have his own apartment. Like one man, one vote, one apartment, so forth. And that's not always the case. I'm diatribing here. I apologize. I'll come right back to you.
Okay.
But one of my favorite economist philosophers is Thomas Sowell. It was spelled so well, and he's 95 now, and he's going to be with us only very shortly. But he talked about being in affordable housing when he was young. He was a grad student, and New York City area, something like that. And he said, I lived in the place that I could afford. For me, that was affordable housing. Everything else is subsidized housing. And so if you need some kind of stipend, then it's not sustainable per se, unless there's some beneficence. So whenever they have these other arrangements, if we have 40B or whatever new name they come up for something like that, things are isolated. It's always it's like Adam's rib. It's being taken out of the corpus of the project itself. And I'm not a developer per se, but I think things should be made simple. Every time we lather on more regulations and all these stipulations, it becomes a place for secrets and graft and all that kind of stuff. I grew up in New York City. We had rent-controlled apartments, and people don't put them out on the market. What they do is they literally sometimes adopt somebody to become your new child so he can take your apartment because they only go for an offspring. So people with no kids or the kids are gone, they pay for an adoption. Somebody gets adopted, they get to take the lease. It creates kind of a sinecure, a black market aspect. And all these things, they sound great. We're going to make affordable housing. Anyway, so I'm giving you a little pushback on that concept, but I'm wondering how you envision your role as a city, kind of philosophically. You're running the city. What's the city's role? What are the major functions of the city? Does it include this kind of stipulation for housing, or are you just talking about carve-outs for the bigger projects?
Well, we already have the inclusionary zone in our city. That's something that is...
What is that?
What it is in certain areas of the city, if you want to build over a certain amount of units, you have to set aside, I believe it's 15% at 90% of AMI. I think we need to cut that 90%. What's that?
So you're talking about of these quote-unquote affordable units for developers. Yeah. So they should be for even...
They should actually be affordable.
Well, yeah.
We're just fooling ourselves and allowing the developers to strip mine our community. If they want to come in here and build something larger than a certain size, they should have to give something back.
Right. Well, I would dispute what they should have to give back. I'm just kind of a market guy, yeah. And I think their job as developers is to develop stuff.
That's right.
They're not there to be the nannies, the mommies, the caretakers of the city, the stewards. I don't even think the city should be doing that. Frankly, I think the city should step back and, the Garden City became that not by, kind of the busybodying of certain aspects. I mean, frankly, I think things have gotten bigger. We have like bigger schools, bigger staffs. I've written on this topic, actually I have a Substack on this, but when I was back in the Neanderthal, when I was a child, could have been the Paleozoic, I forget, we were young, I couldn't spell either one. We had public schools, and there was a teacher principal, a nurse, whatever. We didn't. Right now, everything's kind of flipped around. The huge budgets for ancillary staff. I think teachers who actually sit down in the classrooms or stand up and talk to kids comprise about 35% of the payroll of pretty much elementary schools all over the state. And we have gotten very bloated, and we keep providing and so forth. All this kind of like niceness kind of gets hijacked. So it's like the road to somewhere is paved with good intentions. And I don't necessarily think that's our roadway. So I'm just wondering, my understanding, you're an alumnus or former head of the Newton Taxpayers Association. What's the taxpayer angle that you're promoting?
Well, I think first off that we need to cut some of that ancillary staff in the schools. I think that we need to free up some of that money to pay the teachers, to keep them from having another illegal work stoppage. I think that right now the schools are spending too much on administration. We need to fix that. I think Dr. Nolan is on the right track for fixing our schools. But when I graduated from high school in '82, we were the 5th best school system in the country. Now we're not the 5th best in the state. We're the 10th best in Massachusetts. We need to bring the schools back, and I think part of that is getting the money into the classrooms as opposed to with the ancillary staff and the administration, things like that. But right now, as it stands, we have a large contingent in the city that want to have a more diversified city. And they are under the impression that by allowing these 40B projects, they're going to get that. I think that we really need to push if we want to be a diversified city and have our children work, living with people of different races, creeds, religions, and income levels. We need to drop some of those income levels, and I think that the best way to do that is by changing what we require for somebody to build in this city. They're coming into our city, they're getting the benefits of what we do in this city to get people in to buy or rent their apartments and condos. We should get something back for that. We shouldn't just be saying run wild. We have zoning, we have regulations, and I think part of those regulations should be that the developers that want to come in here and do business with us need to follow some of those guidelines. And I think it's just the right thing to do, as opposed to giving lip service and having 80 or 90% of AMI, which is not affordable. They've been telling us for 50 years that 40B is going to bring affordable housing to Newton. And for 50 years, we've allowed developers to hit us about the head and shoulders with the 40B statute to build bigger and bigger projects, and we have very little low to moderate income housing.
Yeah, but I'm kind of not into this at all, and I think we'll probably find some other avenues rather than just kind of beating this one about the head. But for me, it gives you this compromise situation where it was a little bit like the example when they started getting the cigarette companies to pay out the huge, federally, pay out these, and to the states and so forth, pay out these huge fines, whatever. So at a certain point, the states were promised, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars as compensation for the cigarette tobacco stuff, and they didn't want the tobacco to disappear. Because if tobacco went bankrupt tomorrow, they'd lose their hundreds of millions of dollars. So what you wind up, go to bed with dogs, wake up with fleas kind of thing. On the one hand, if you're against these bigger developments, on the other hand, you want them to provide all the things that you want as the niceties, as charity, whatever, then you're going to have bigger projects because that's how they do it. They need to make money too. They're not going to do it for charity per se. They need to have their cut. But anyway, I kind of want to segue to management issues and how the city's been managed and what, from a top-down, from an executive position, you would provide, and what's been your experience? I know you're an attorney. What's been your experience? What's your mindset that would, differentiate you from, say, most recent mayoral executive roles in the city of Newton? And how would you kind of put a different kind of flush on city governance?
Well, I think the first thing that we would need to do would be to manage our budget. We have a ballpark idea of what we're going to take in for revenue every year. there's no excuse for needing an override. We know how much money we have to spend. We just need to live within our means. And that means if our contracts, when they come up, we negotiate tougher, I'm going to be the one pushing to negotiate for the citizens in Newton. We're not as a city working for the unions. They have their own management. They have their own negotiators. We need to negotiate for what's best for our city. I think that saying right off the bat, we're not going to have an override during my administration is something that I want to stick to. I know that my opponent has said that depending on the circumstances and if we trust him and things like that, that he may have an override. Well, that's not good enough for me. We have a lot of people in this city that are just here barely, and they can't afford to pay more taxes. The diversity of the city is going to suffer by raising the taxes, so that eventually only rich people will be living in Newton. And I don't think that's the Newton that we want to live in. And so I think right off the bat we have to look at that. The second thing we have to look at is, are there too many city employees? I know right now we have a school and a city HR department, a school and city purchasing department. Why can't the city HR department do all the hiring? Why can't the school purchasing department do all the purchasing? I think those are right there, right off the bat, we're saving money for the city. Those are two things right off the bat I would look at.
Yeah. So I want to be your whisperer here. You know, what I would look at is the enrollment. You know, I've said this, you know, many times, so I apologize to my previous listeners, but, you know, if Apple or Dell or MSNBC or whatever lost 14% of their, you know, customers, viewers, or whatever, their heads would roll. And, you know, you would have cutbacks. We, in the last, the data are somewhat debatable, but, you know, I think pre and post-COVID, we've gone down about 14% in enrollment of students. Now, Mark Laredo says that a lot of that's just demographics, people, fewer kids, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it was very abrupt. At the time of COVID, people pulled their kids out because we didn't keep the schools open, and St. Sebastian might have, and so forth. Somehow the virus didn't hit Catholic schools, I guess. It's one of those very smart viruses. And I think people had a chance at home to see, you know, virtually, in virtual reality, what was going on in the schools. They weren't happy with it. So not only were the schools not open, you know, in person, but when they were giving their stuff, the people didn't like the kind of very woke aspects to it. You know, critical race theory and kind of isolating people based on race and privilege and all that kind of stuff. And so I think they have a failing product in the schools. You know, you point out that our schools are not ranked as high. The city's not ranked as high, but you know, that I think they could easily, you know, devote a lot of their time towards teaching, you know, the 3 R's, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic, that kind of stuff. And what they've gone into is kind of rhetoric of politics and so forth, and it's not really their job, and there's a kind of a whole political tinge to it. But at any rate, my thought is if you lose 14% of your students, you know, you could, that's like, I mean, I could do the math here, that's 1/7 approximately, and why don't you close 1/7 of your schools or get rid of 1/7 of your staff one way or another? Nothing like that happened. Their actual employment didn't change. I think they lost one job or something like that pre and post COVID. It's nothing like that, and they kept all the schools. Not only they want an override for it. So kind of on a mathematical basis, you know, where do you draw the line? How can you do it? You know, can you be firm about any of this stuff? And do would you be able to, you know, enforce cutbacks in the school system at all, or are we just budgetary, or what? And would you be able to get the city council along with it?
Well, as mayor, I'm going to be the 9th member of the school committee. That's part of the mayor's responsibilities. I would be working with Dr. Nolan and the school committee to get some of that done. Now, I think we should lose more than 7% of our school department, because again, we need to get rid of some of those layers of administration. We don't need 2/3 of our employees being administrators and 1/3 in the classrooms with our students.
Well, they're not all administrators. A lot of them is like the special ed kind of complex has grown.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there's occupational therapists and regular therapists and all, special aides and so forth.
Yeah.
We've gotten far more diagnoses, kind of mental health aspect ever since this thing called mental health parity came into being really in the 80s and 90s, and then kind of enshrined during the 2008, and then the Affordable Care Act. And so that's a whole separate thing. So we've gotten more and more diagnoses, the A's, ADD, Asperger's, autism, anxiety, all this kind of stuff, all these 4 A's have made a big foray into our school and kind of grows the ancillary, helping staff. So there's a lot more, aides, AIDS. Anyway, I don't know how we get around that. I personally, would be interested if we could have some kind of competition amongst the schools. I don't know if that's at all possible to get any kind of charter schools. My understanding is no, but can a mayor do anything about that? I'm not sure we've ever even asked. What are your thoughts about charter schools?
I think charter schools are wonderful. I think that it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get one in the next few years, but I think that we should open up competition between all of our schools and the systems. If you think that Lincoln Elliott is the best school for your child because of what they're doing and their administration and their principal, I think that if you can get your child there, you should be able to put them on a list to be enrolled there. If you think that your child would be better over at Oak Hill for middle school than they would be at F.A. Day because of what they're teaching and what their administration looks like, I think you should also be able to do that. I think that we should also make that school money portable. I think that you should be able to put your son or daughter into a private school and get some of that money towards their tuition. I think that we should make this competitive. If we just say this is what you get and this is all you get, there's no need for these schools to be better. We need to be competitive. We need to strive for the best schools we can make. And if that means that nobody wants to go to Franklin School, well, maybe we need to take a look at what's going on at Franklin School and find out why nobody wants to go there and fix it. And now I'm just saying that as an example. I don't know the administration at the Franklin School. I don't know if they're doing a wonderful job or not.
Right, you're using it as an example.
I'm just using it as an example.
Right.
But we really need to be competitive, and we really need to strive to have the best schools we can so that people, regardless of where they live, want to send their kids to the schools near them. But until then, we don't know what's going on with these and why they're not performing to the level that we need them to perform.
Fair enough. So what are the things that that you've heard that people are asking you about when you go door to door? I mean, what are the things that Newton voters care about? I mean,
the biggest thing they care about are the roads. I hear, well, my road's been on the list to be repaved for 3 years. When's it going to get done? We've had this pothole here for 6 months. When's somebody going to come fix it? What are they doing on Washington Street, taking out a lane? It's dangerous. It ties things up. It seems like that's very important. And the second thing that I hear a lot is the city is being overdeveloped. A lot of people are concerned that we don't have the infrastructure to handle the influx of the citizens that are going to be coming in. A lot of people are concerned that the green space is leaving Newton, and it's no longer going to be the garden city. It's going to be I've heard the concrete city. So those are the two things that I've heard the most from people when I'm out there.
Now, you're a lifelong Newton resident.
Yes.
So as a kind of I guess from a historical standpoint, what have you noticed most about Newton changing aside from this kind of maybe more built up? Any kind of other, I guess the essence of Newton, who the people are and so forth? You have about 4 minutes left. I don't know if you want to talk about your vision of Newton, what it is, what it's been. You wanted to go to some particular type of Newton that you have in mind?
Well, when I was growing up, Newton used to be a moderate city. Now I think that they're more radical in the way that the citizens think. I see, the rally every Saturday in Newton Center. There's, 50, 60 people there holding signs about how they're unhappy with the federal government. And I don't know, I think that they could be doing more productive things by being involved in the city, as opposed to screaming that the tide's coming in. I think that, again, the overdevelopment, which is we're losing the character of our village centers. It's going to be gone in a while, and I think that each village center has a beautiful character. I like to visit many of them. I was in Auburndale today. I stopped in at a couple local shops. I go down to Nonantum all the time. I mean, how many people do you know that can say, I got a sausage guy? I got a sub guy. That's what I love about the villages in Newton, is that, I've got a cobbler. How many other cobblers are there in America, let alone in this area?
Right.
It's a beautiful thing that we still have, but it's starting to disappear.
Well, those things happen. I mean,
Yeah.
things happen. It's, it's not, 1890 yielded, 1990, and now we're in 2025. So things are going to change. But, I'm like thinking more about values. And what are the kind of values that you noticed in Newton, aside from some of those more superficial aspects? And what are the values you'd like to impart or impute through the schools and through our system? In 2 minutes.
I'd like to see some education on the differences and the similarities between different people. Newton seems to have a high level of anti-Semitism, and it's seen in the schools. And I think that we need to come together and teach that, we're not all the same, but we're not all that different. I think that there's a polarity that is out there, and I don't like it.
Yeah, well, it seems to be a little bit of a different world. I think that, I don't want to get federal here, but it seems like the left is going further left.
Yeah.
I think they're going to wind up so far off the branch, they're going to fall off. And I'm hoping that, we provide a solid place. I mean, I think the Garden City's fine. People come here with, I call it kind of a covenant principle. That if you were in a homeowners association, you buy someplace in Florida, you want this village because it's a golf course, a pool, and you have rules. And so people have a kind of a covenant when they move to this place here, Newton, and they have certain expectations. I think a little bit of a bait and switch when the councilors or whatever wind up, doing these zoning variances on their own kind of whim. Anyway, final words. When's the election? Who should they vote for, and do you have any other recommendations?
Well, the election is November 4th. I'm the first person on the ballot. I'd like to ask for your vote. And I'd like to tell you, I love this city. I want to be your mayor. I want to work for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Al. We appreciate that. And thank you. Please share this widely, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Well, thank you for having me.